of what we are talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, so
we started recording, so we're good to go.
Yeah, so we have a draft. We have a draft, and we did not amend it. Amend, how do you call it in French? I know Janelle.
Tu peux parler en français, tu peux parler en français, je comprends.
Oui, Janelle parle français, oui. On n'avait pas fait l'amendement de notre constitution. We didn't do the amendment.
The amendment, yeah.
So, yeah, so we need to. So we were just focusing on C2C and be part of the conference and everything. Follow what the conference tell us to do. So. Right. So I put it aside, so I didn't care about that.
Yeah.
Because I know I had the umbrella. I had the umbrella that is taking care of me. I have a family.
Yes.
That's I didn't care about the constitution. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, that's helpful. That's helpful, Theo. So that undertaking can be a bigger task if it doesn't have it already. Part of the application process involves submitting that document to CRA. Within that document, it outlines the structure of your leadership. And so your structure of leadership needs to be meeting or connecting or making decisions that align with the Constitution. So how your church meets and functions needs to actually reflect what your Constitution says. So you may have copies of different constitutions that are Canadian, that are accepted, but they have to also accurately reflect how you function as your particular church. So we can give you some guidance, but you would know best how you function, and I would encourage you to try to make that as accurate as possible to how you're currently meeting, because that will indicate what pieces of your community of Philadelphia Miracle Ministry Church need to maybe might cause some question for CRA, because that's important to know how you function if it aligns with the requirements, right? Because you want to know what those two pieces are. So another piece to consider in this application process, there's the governing documents, but then there's also you need to submit what they would call your charitable purpose and activities. So basically what that means is, what are you doing and for what reason? So for you, it could be, we meet as a church to advance the Christian faith. And that's acceptable according to charity. That is an acceptable charitable status purpose. Your activities could be a Sunday morning gathering and your Sunday schools and your women's ministry or youth ministry, whatever activities you do that help to achieve the purpose of your church, you include those. In the application process, you need to list that purpose and all the activities. And they have to be in alignment with Canadian law. So if there's anything international that you do, and I don't know if you do anything as a church overseas, like let's say back in Congo or anywhere else, sometimes this can cause some question with the government because it's a Canadian charitable status. So there gets into some murky or some confusing details. So that's a point that you might want to clarify or look into. Yep, Theo.
Yeah, and I just want to, in terms of the purpose and objectives, we already, before I connected to the conference, I registered the church to the province. So I submitted already the objective and the purpose, and we will keep those purpose that's already they are already in the system of the province, the government.
Were you given, sorry, Theo, were you given a business number when you applied to the province, the company?
we do have the business number
So
already.
you're incorporated then?
Yes, we incorporated already.
Okay, so then you actually, you can use those incorporation documents for this application process.
We
That's
incorporated already.
Another thing, okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Theo. Yeah, the incorporation.
I want just to ask and to just to complete you. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. This charity. It's a lot of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing. It's not easy, and I come to understand that there's a thing you say there, like if our objective, we have to stick on those objectives. We can't do anything if I did a mistake saying that ministry just in Canada, we will stick on Canada. That's so.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it's an important piece to know. Sometimes it's good to know what the pieces and the responsibilities are. And like you said, Theo, the government is very cautious sometimes. In the Canadian government, they like to have lots of control in that sense. They like to know what is happening, especially if they are offering some advantages. And so it's very important that all of the requirements are met when given a charitable status. So some of those pieces, if they are not met, like let's say that Philadelphia Miracle Ministries was given charitable status, a good question to know the answer to is what would happen if some of those requirements were not met, what the CRA would call, they would say non-compliant. So I just did a brief look before our phone call, and some of the main pieces that is required of your church if you are given charitable status, the big main pieces, the two big ones are every single year, you must, by law, submit a form, a tax form called the T3010. And in that tax form, it lays out a number of questions, financially and functionally, how your church is doing that year. That needs to be submitted every year. If 1 year that is missed and it's not submitted, there can be a fine of $500 and you might lose your charitable status. If in your reporting, so that's one main piece, is the tax form that has to be submitted yearly as a charity. The second piece is your receipting, so tax receipting. If people give money to the church, you need to be keeping records of a very specific detailed records that the CRA outlines with dates and names and donation purposes, and you have to keep all of the accounting information, the ledgers and everything, and issue a tax receipt. That's actually the responsibility of the charity. The government doesn't issue that. And there's a specific way that the church needs to do that. And if that is done incorrectly, there can also be penalties for a church. So it's really important to learn these steps and these procedures. I personally am not familiar with the procedures. I've never had to do that. But we do have people within our conference who have done that, within the Canadian conference particularly, who have expressed that they could share some information on that, but it's a big process. So just understanding the responsibility of that is very important for your church. You wouldn't want to put your church in a position where you might be at risk for non-compliance and then have these penalties. So it's important to know those things. So that there's the application process, and in that, like I said, you need your governing document, which we covered. And the second piece is there's the purposes and activities, which again, we just covered. A third piece is a financial audit. So the government needs to see an audit of a year's work of finances, and they need to see how the financial accounting or bookkeeping has been done and where the financial sustainability is. So they want to see, does this organization have enough money coming in to cover the costs of what they cost to function? So if you have a pastor that you are paying, you need to have enough money coming in to pay for that pastor. If you have a facility that you rent, you need to show that you have enough money coming in that you can pay the rent. So the government is looking at a financial piece as well to the sustainability of the charitable organization. Along with that, currently, so for Philadelphia Miracle Ministry, up until this point, your financials have been kept at the Canadian Conference of Mennonite Brethren Churches. So financial accounting, record keeping, audit information is all kept in files and organized at the Canadian Conference. And I believe you work with Esther. Is that correct? Yeah. So should you get your own charitable status, that responsibility would then lay on your church itself. And that usually is involving a treasurer or a financial team. And that's a big responsibility, because all of those records need to be kept for the duration of the charity. So, 10 years from now, you have to still have record of every single gift or donation or tithe or offering that you've received, and it has to be documented appropriately. And that's one of the responsibilities, because at any given time, the CRA is allowed to audit any charity, and that information needs to be offered and accessible. So proper document keeping is important. Also, when there's changing in roles. So let's say Claudine is your treasurer now. Maybe 2 years from now, Claudine is not, or someone else is. She needs to be able to have all of this documentation that she can give to the next person in charge. So the financial piece is another piece. And I think the final piece that you need to submit in an application are your board members. And they need to have their names, their contact information. They want a lot of information about your board members. And then you need to submit all board meeting minutes. So every time your board meets together to talk about church business, you need to have that recorded on paper. And all of those minutes that you have, you need to keep and file so that the government, so CRA, can actually reference your board meeting minutes. So anytime a decision is made, or you are just meeting for regular business as a church, or you want to open a new ministry or program, any of those meetings need to be documented. So in the application process, they want you to submit your board meeting minutes with your application. So anything you have up until this point. If you have those, wonderful. If you don't, that might be a challenge, because they want to see how you've been functioning, and whether or not your governance, your board, your members of leadership have been meeting according to the regulation of the Constitution. So you actually need to be meeting a minimum of once a year together. And your board needs to have at least 3 minimum members, and the 3 members of your board cannot be related. So you can't have a husband and a wife and one other person. Your board would have to be 3 unrelated members. Cousins, I think, is okay. But those are the final regulations. So that's very broad overview. There are pages and pages of details. The government is very, very, very thorough. But in general, that's an overview of what the application process needs to have to submit. And then once it's submitted, it can take 4 to 6 months, maybe longer now because of all the COVID thing, but 4 to 6 months to process. So while it is in process, technically you would not be considered a charity until it's given a charity status. So even though you've submitted the application, you won't be granted charity status until that's deemed approved. Does that make sense? So that's the process. Like I said, it's a little bit more complex than just filling out a form online and requesting that you can be a charity. There's a lot of proof and paperwork that you need to provide. And all of that paperwork needs to accurately reflect who you are as a church. So maybe I'll pause here and I'll jump back to where I started and say, as a community, you have the choice to discern whether you want to pursue this and you want to go down that route as a church or not. The biggest factor that it will affect will be your charitable receipting and your ability to apply for government breaks with the government as a charity. I'm going to pause. I'd love to hear from you. Are there questions you need clarification on anything I've just said? I just said a lot.
Baleke, when I get a message to my board, I think Baleke may have some questions. I would like to him, if he have a question, feel free to ask it.
Okay. Thank you very much I've been listening and I'm finding too much to digest. So, because as I'm getting the information is a little bit hard and tough. So we have heard what you guys said about applying the charities, all the policies or the criteria that people are supposed to get the charity numbers. And I think my question was, how is the Brethren Mennonites gonna be implicating or gonna be helping us in that process of applying for the charity numbers? That was the question that I need to ask first. The other question that I would also like to know is now as I heard in the meeting that we're not gonna be depending on you as a church. So the question was, how are we gonna be surviving during all this time that we're not gonna be using your charity number? So those are some of the, if I forget some, maybe you guys can, some people can at least maybe have another idea. But those are two questions mostly that I need maybe to hear about you first. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions, Baleke.
Yeah.
Those are good questions. Certainly, it may be, we want to be able to support and assist churches in this process to the capacity that we are able. As a conference, we are connected to our churches, but we are one step removed. So we are connected, but we're one step removed. So to help understand, we would consider support and walking alongside assistance, answering questions, providing assistance where we can. But when it comes to some of the working of the church and information that is particular to your church, because we are not members of the church, that particular conference, or that particular church group, your church, we might not be as familiar or able to put some of those documents together in the same way. So for example, I would not be able to help you to write your constitution because I don't understand what you have as a church decided. But if you were to put something together, I would be happy to look at it with you, maybe to highlight areas that might be questioned
That
by
need
the
to be
CRA.
changed. Mhm.
Exactly. In terms of the financial model, one of the ways that we can walk through that with you is, like I said, outlining helping you to understand what are the necessary steps in order to keep the appropriate information required. So we can help give you that information, but we would not be able to keep that information for you because we don't have that information. Does that make sense? Because we are one step removed from the church. Currently, the Canadian Conference does have that information because they have had control of that because you are under their charitable status.
That's right.
The reason that can't continue is under the Canadian Conference, they have also a purposes and activities for their charity. And the start of churches is part of that. But once a church has been established for a certain amount of time, it can no longer remain as a full church under their status because it needs to be an independent church. So there is a transition period, which is why you've been allowed to use their status number, because you were a newer church starting out, but you have been around for longer than 3 years. And so that transition into your own status has to happen under their own mandate, under their own CRA purpose and charity. Does that make sense? The conference isn't in their mandate or in their purposes. The Canadian does not have long-term established churches under their charitable status. They can have new, emerging, starting church plants. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sorry, Anita, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just maybe Pastor knew about this, about the fact that we're supposed to be with the Mennonite for sometimes not more than 3 years. So I understand, I get it. But I'm still wondering how we are gonna operate without your support, as in we have exceeded the 3 years. Is that correct?
I think it's past the 3 years. Yeah, I think it's been longer, like almost 5 or 6, I think.
Okay.
And the other thing, yesterday I was also doing the research about the charity status on the new role, the new job I have here. We also do a lot of research about those government funds, that's also the part of the role I'm playing here in Stand Back. So I found out, it's also part of the ask of my board. The period the time we will start and applying for status. Let's say if we start submit our application, those the time we're gonna spend 6 months, those between those times, we can't do anything related to charity. As I checked that, so we are not qualified to do applying for any funds related. So so I even Janelle tried to explain that once we submit our application, we can't do anything relating to charity funds, something like that. Yeah.
I have a question, Theo. Does Philadelphia Miracle Ministries, have you currently been receiving government funding as a charity, or what would be the primary change for you from how you're currently functioning right now? What would be the biggest change if the charitable status was not there? I just for curiosity, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, the main thing is there for offerings, We work with Esther, and every offering we do, we record names of people who give their offerings, and that's the only thing. And last year we have been applying for summer school program. That will stop. We were very grateful for this help because it helped our children to find jobs. So that will stop. And yeah, I think that's it.
So you did receive government funding for summer jobs and other programs that you ran this summer?
Yeah, no, last year we didn't. You know, this pandemic, we received it and with Esther, and we returned the application. We returned the money. Yeah, we returned the money because we didn't want to spend the money. With this pandemic, we will not. We sit down with a CCMBC conference, and they advise me that is no good because it's gonna be the government is giving too much restrictions and will not handle them, and we qualified and we returned the money. We told them that sorry, we'll apply again when we're gonna be ready. Yeah.
And that's because you couldn't meet the requirements of how it had to be spent?
No, not how to spend, but how to, it has been hard running most of the summer programs didn't run because of government restrictions.
Right, yeah. That makes sense. So you wouldn't be able to complete the program that you were given money to do.
Yeah, but money was welcome to, money.
Yeah, exactly. There's always a catch, right? No, that's good question. I think in terms of support, so one of the ways, so beyond this process, I think what might be helpful, maybe I make a suggestion and you tell me if this is helpful. What I've done for other churches is I've put together a list, a document of areas that we would ask our churches to be working at. So there are some responsibilities. So at Philadelphia Miracle Ministry, you would have to decide who would be taking on some of these roles, and it would have to be a team of people. And then we, in that document, will list off, this is ways that we can help you. So as a conference, part of the way that we want to work beyond this application process is even just in relationship, in support, to be part of a bigger church body. So to connect Philadelphia Miracle Ministries in your church to be a part of a bigger community in Manitoba of Mennonite Brethren churches. Some of those churches are in this process as well, for same as you, applying for charitable status. They're currently in that process. There's that in-between window, like you've said. So from the time that January 2021 starts until you've given charitable status, you've said, Theo, what happens? Because we won't have the charity status. That's a question I think I feel like I can ask of the Canadian Conference. I cannot speak with final authority at this point because it's a Canadian Conference charitable status, not a Mennonite Brethren Church of Manitoba status. So I would have to look into that, but I can follow up with you on that and give you a better answer, I think. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I can look into that and follow up with what would happen in that intermediate time.
Mm-hmm.
If you choose to go forward with applying for your charitable status, it might be helpful or important for your church to maybe have an outline or to have a document that states how the operations or responsibilities will be handed out into your community, and how you will be completing those operations and those responsibilities. And we'd be happy to look at that with you and to provide any helpful suggestions, or whether, you know, there's areas in which we could help as well. You don't have to stop meeting as a church. You don't have to have a charity status to worship together, to do ministry. That doesn't have to stop. But if you're wanting to pursue this direction as a church, and you feel like it is what you need as a church, it's important to you to have this as a church, then those other pieces I've mentioned earlier need to be looked into. And I know, Baleke, you said it's a lot of information, so I will put some of those pieces in a document, and I will email that out to you. And I think what you can do as a community, maybe it's important if I send this information to you, then you at Philadelphia Miracle Ministry can meet together as a board, look at this information. Maybe it's a checklist. You can look at it. You can pray together. You can discern as a community where God is leading you. If God is leading you to do this, this is important, and you feel it is very significant for your church to do this, it's very important, and that you want to take on that work and the responsibility of it, then you can come and we'll help you through that process. We will walk with the church through that process, giving you the information that we have available. But maybe what we can do here, I think a good way forward, and I'll maybe suggest this, that we that I put together a document for you with list of items. I send it to your board, to all of you here and the members that are not present, that you as a community meet together as a church and discern what you want to do, what is important for you. And maybe in that meeting, who will be taking some of these roles on might be an important piece as well. And then we can have a follow-up meeting with you guys with any questions or questions or concerns that you have that come out of that meeting for next steps. Does that make sense? Is that helpful moving forward?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it is.
Because we do want to be able to be of help to you, and we understand it's a big process, and there will be a lot of work involved. But if you want to go through that process and you're willing to take on that work, we're willing to walk alongside you in that process.
Hey, the rice smells good.
Good. We have that Claudine who has a family meeting, and then maybe we we didn't hear Cam say something before we leave.
Yes, Claudine.
Everything was perfect. I heard you.
Sorry, I missed.
Hello.
Sorry, can you say that again, Claudine? I didn't catch that.
I say everything was perfect. I don't have anything to ask or to add.
Okay.
Good.
Well, thank you. And as Janelle mentioned, what we'll do is try and send you some papers that you can look at, and hopefully it makes some sense there. Thanks, Janelle, for sharing this info. And maybe if it's time to go, could I pray before we end? Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
God, thank you that you are with us, and thank you that you are so loving, so gracious. God, we ask that you would be providing for Philadelphia Miracle Church, that you would provide for them your joy, your grace, your healing, God, would you pour out upon them your Spirit so that they might continue to be aware of your love for them, that they might share that love that you have for them, that they might share that with those around them. God, I ask your blessing on their families. I pray, God, that you would give them wisdom and discernment and insight into the decisions that need to be made. God, would you guide and direct them? God, thank you that we had the opportunity to be together this afternoon in this way. God, we just ask now your blessing upon each of us here. God, we delight in knowing that we get to be in your presence and be in your love today. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Really good to
Thank
meet
you
you.
so much.
Hopefully soon we can meet in person. I would like that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
after this pandemic.
Yes,
Yeah.
stay safe and stay healthy. And we
Yeah.
continue to pray for
Thank
your
you.
community.
You
Amen.
too.
Same to
Yeah.
you too.
And
Okay.
may you have a wonderful holiday season, even if it may look different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful Christmas.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
gonna
Thank
be
you.
over very soon.
Yeah.
I hope so. Hope
We
so.
hope
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Good. Good.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
for your time.
Thank
Okay.
you very
Good.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Okay, Janelle, may you send me the link, the recording?
Yes, and will you send me the email addresses of everyone on this meeting?
Yes.
Good. Good.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will send you the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's sure.
Thank you.
Really good. Good to
Thank
be
you.
with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you very much, Cam.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
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 Have a good
Yeah.
evening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. Thanks for leading. And we will, do you have a moment there?
Yeah, I just was waiting for everyone to be off the call. Hold on, I'm just
Yeah.
going to stop recording for a sec here.
Yeah. Yeah.